This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And Doc, as you know, one of our very fine partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is The Athletic, which is premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. And listeners of this very episode of Tigers Talk this week can get 20% off the first year of an annual subscription to The Athletic by visiting theathletic.com/DSP. And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles McElroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, always enjoy the conversation, talking baseball. Lots to talk about with the Detroit Tigers. But first, I'm definitely curious, how was boys' night going to the Tigers game? You went down to Comerica Park last week. It was a fun time. The Tigers are winners of 8 of their last 12. They had an 8-4 homestand, but I believe the game you went to, the Tigers got rocked.
They did. They lost. They lost bad. And I was embarrassed to be there at Comerica, but at least I had my buddies there. We were drinking. The drinks were flowing, so we had a lot of energy amongst the 4 of us, so we were doing all right. And actually, this might be sad but true, but we left early. So I don't know if you can get on me and start saying this or that about me and me being a true Tigers fan. But I left early because of my buddies, too. They wanted to leave. They're really not into the game and watching the game. We were at the New Amsterdam bar. I was doing more drinking than watching the Tigers game, and I'm sorry to admit that, but that is true.
Now, this was last Tuesday's game. You went down there with your buddies, and it was Michael Fulmer's performance, I think?
Michael Fulmer got rocked. Yes, it was Michael Fulmer. You're right. Almost forgot myself. But the righty went out there, did not look sharp, and he hasn't really looked great.
Who was the opponent?
So far, consistently this season. The Halos. The Angels. I played the Angels, and Mike Trout hit a home run Monday, Memorial Day, not Tuesday. I didn't get to see Shohei Ohtani. So, it was all right. The game was all right. It wasn't great, but
Vito, the way you guys act in terms of going to a baseball game, it just seemed like Comerica was the place to go in order to drink.
Well, yeah, it was.
You went to Comerica to drink. So your view was nice. I saw the pictures. Good job. You can follow Vito on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. You can follow Vito at Vito Jerome on Twitter. You can follow us on our Twitter page for the network at Detroit Podcast. You can check out all the great photos. But it's interesting that you guys made it. And I think that's what young people are doing.
They do. Trust me, it's not just my friend group, because I actually like watching. So I will watch an inning or two while I'm there. It's sad but true, but think about it. There's a lot of people, a lot of kids or people my age that go in their friend groups. And guess what? Guess how much they're watching of the game? Not even an inning. I mean, seriously, what do you think they're watching? Or they're watching anything, getting up and moving around the ballpark and going to the New Amsterdam bar. They could care less about the results on the field.
Understood. And so, did you guys meet up with any female friends? Anything like that?
Well, 2 of them have girlfriends. Nick doesn't, and I don't, but we weren't really looking for that. We were just talking, We were chummy with each other, just having fun, a good time amongst the 4 of us.
No offense, but your crew seems just to be like kind of typical young cats, just kind of going out there doing the thing of drinking. It's like, what you need is like a fire starter. You need somebody that's going to ignite.
Kickstart everything, yeah. Is that you, Doc? Are you trying to infer that is you?
Kind of what I'm saying is you guys need somebody in the crew to kind of maybe go a little overboard, be a little bit fun, maybe invite a couple ladies from different sections into the party, or just go around and be like, hey, you want a free drink? You want something? And just kind of invite people, you need somebody that's really actively social. You guys kind of just go drink, shoot the breeze, and leaving early, I think, personally, is a major violation because, I can understand maybe your point of view in that you probably didn't pay for the ticket.
And I didn't. It was free. I paid for a drink for Nick. That was it.
And that's what happens. When you get free tickets, you don't validate it. You don't appreciate it. And so you go down there, haphazardly, leave after 6 innings and things like that. For me, I kind of at least like to stay until the 8th, 9th inning and enjoy the whole experience and walk around and do stuff and things like that. But you guys did it. It's fine. You had a good time with it. The Tigers got whooped. A rare game, at home where they lost because afterwards, which was interesting in that they have a series versus the Angels and they play the Yankees and they had, who was the weekend series again?
So yeah, Doc, they played the Angels for 4. They played the Blue Jays over the weekend, and then they had the Yankees Monday, a doubleheader at Comerica, and now they're in Beantown starting with the night of this recording Tuesday night, and what a tough schedule. Then they have Cleveland over the weekend, back at home, but still a very tough how many games here? You got 3 against the Bo Sox, 3 against the Indians on the weekend, so a lot of tough games coming up here for the Tigers, Doc.
But a stretch of baseball where you can say they played well. They've rallied.
Played well enough, yeah.
They played pretty well against the Angels. Toronto, they played well. They split versus the Yankees, so it's good. In terms of the last week, you would say that the Tigers had themselves a decent week, and of course, everybody's talking about it, whether you're for it or against it. In the series versus the Angels, there was a situation in which there was some rain and there was a delay a little bit, and all of a sudden they're trying to come back. I believe it was last Wednesday's game, I think, but you can verify that, where the Detroit Tigers played. There was a little bit of rain, a little bit of weather, some concern, and in the midst of, I think, a second rain delay, a goose is on the field, and you have staff from the Detroit Tigers grounds crew trying to get this goose off of the field. And unfortunately, they try. This goose finally, after several attempts, got off the ground and started to take flight. But unfortunately, smack, right into a scoreboard. And somebody who was a professional working with animals, luckily, the goose fell into the stands and was okay. And a nice, kind person cared for the goose, and it sparked off, something for the fans to enjoy. This whole Rally Goose started, and the Tigers have kind of played a little bit stronger. They've kind of embraced it a little bit by developing and, having a cutout of a goose. They don't have a real goose, obviously. They have a mock goose that they put in the dugout. And the Tigers have played better baseball. You even put in your article,
yes,
you put that the Tigers have scored significantly more runs. And of course, they've lost a couple games since. It wasn't going to be a situation where they were going to go undefeated. But for me, I liked it in that we were able to sell some T-shirts on our Twitter page, and that was pretty cool. Rally Goose was there, and I think the Tigers are embracing it. But from our talks before the show, it seems like to me you're not into it. You think it's kind of stupid from how...
Well, it's gimmicky. But they have won 5 out of 7 since, including... splitting the doubleheader with the Yankees. So 5 out of 7 with that being said, 4 out of 5 going into that Monday doubleheader with the Yankees at Comerica Park. So, by the way, it's hashtag Rally Goose, too. And it happened last Wednesday, and in the 6th inning of a rain delay at Copa against the Halos, this is when it actually happened. Detroit was tied 1-1 with the Halos going into the rain delay, went on to score 5 runs, and went on to win the ball game Wednesday night last week. So, Tigers have really played well since this Rally Goose came to fruition, but do I like it myself? I think it's gimmicky, and honestly, far too gimmicky for my liking.
Why? Because, Vito, everyone says the baseball season's long. Baseball players kind of rally around things, whether it be superstitions, routine, structure. Young Major League Baseball talent try to rally around fun stuff, and so why are you hating on Rally Goose? I think it's really fun. I think it's really cool. Don't hate on it. I really feel like it's something the Tigers can get behind. They've put out goose-themed notes in their game notes that's released to the media. They've kind of put a goose up there on the big scoreboard for everybody to see. Don't be a hater. I think it's fun.
But when do we move on? Let's be original. Now, that was original at first, but now everybody's running with it. Everybody and their mother, right, is running with that now. Hashtag Rally Goose. In their headlines, in their articles. I did it myself, so hey, trust me, I'm accountable for it. And the Free Press has run now at least a couple of headlines promoting that or, including that in their headlines, hashtag Rally Goose, or just the theme of the Rally Goose, and mentioning that and mentioning it ad nauseum, in my opinion. So, too much for my liking. I just think you got to move on at some point, too. And when do you move on from the Rally Goose? Now, they're still winning for the most part, 5 out of 7 once again, since that Rally Goose did come to fruition last Wednesday. But still, I've almost come to the point where I've had enough already of the Rally Goose. And the Tigers, let's come up with something new now, something fresh. I mean, how long do we give the Rally Goose to run its course for? When does it, run its course to the point where it's old news and we want to come up with something new and fresh, Doc? That's what I'm trying to say here to the masses on Tigers Talk.
So for those that are wondering, the Detroit Tigers did take the Rally Goose on their trip to Fenway. So the goose is there. It will be
goose
present.
is still loose, baby. And I love that saying, the goose is loose. I love that. I put that in my article. Did you see that? I put it into that article about the Rally Goose and the theme of this Rally Goose and what the Tigers have done since it came to fruition once again last Wednesday. And I guess, you know what? They're going to keep running with it. The thing is, when does the Rally Goose just become a goose now? When do the rallies run out of steam? And the thing is, I think they could run out of steam starting with this Beantown series against the Red Sox at Fenway. And then you got the Indians, like I said, over the weekend, back at Comerica, so where the Tigers have been successful for the most part this season. But still, you don't have to, I don't think you can like their odds going up against Beantown, the Red Sox that is, and then the Indians back-to-back series. I mean, it scares me as a Tigers fan, Doc.
So for Vito, the Rally Goose is gimmicky. He's not down for it. He's ready to move on from it.
I am.
Oh, come on, Vito. I like it. I think that...
Now, why do you like it? Give me the reasons then, okay?
I like it because it gives any reason for young cats to compete. It kind of organizes a maybe rallying cry, as maybe corny as it may sound, Rally Goose. It just kind of means that, hey, we're not going to give up. And sometimes you got to look at the way the story unfolded. You got a goose that's trying its absolute hardest, also met with some adversity, smacking into a barrier, a struggle, and then living and surviving. And that's what I think this
You gotta
Tiger
be kidding me. How old are you?
I'm 40 years, almost
You're
40 years
almost
old.
a 40-year-old man talking about this Rally Goose like it's this warrior. Like it's this human being that's a warrior and just accomplished so much and overcame so many challenges. It's a goose. It's a darn bird. Come on, man.
The goose almost got killed at
Okay.
Comerica Park, and it
Cool. What
survived.
do I have to say about it? Good. Good for him. Good for that goose to stay alive. What do I have to say, Doc?
What you're failing to see is the symbolic nature
I
of
know
the
it's
goose.
symbolism.
And the
hey,
young kids-
I went to Catholic grade school, middle school. Trust me, there's a lot of symbolism in the Bible, okay? A lot of biblical passages with symbolism incorporated. I know all about symbolism. This ain't doing it for me, okay? This isn't getting me going. I'm not going to rally for a goose. I'll rally for a beer. How about a rally beer? A rally keg?
What it will take to probably move on from the Rally Goose is something even more significant to grab onto. But the fans like it. They're doing the flapping.
I
and
saw.
they're
Also,
doing
the
it.
young kids. If I ever see you doing that, or any what's the cutoff? Like 25 and up. So like for me, anybody 25 and over that's doing that flap, man, a little bit too much for me. Okay. Now a kid 14 and under, I'll accept it. I'll let it happen.
Unacceptable, Vito. I think you need to get on board with the Rally Goose. It could be something that throughout the season could be a rallying cry to maybe even, like we talked about last week, help the Tigers get to first place. You said that there was no chance that by the middle of this month the Tigers would be in first place, and there's an opportunity. They're winning. They're only a couple games under 500. They're playing a great brand of baseball, and I think they can compete with the likes of a Yankees team and a Red Sox team this week, and I'm excited for the Tigers-Red Sox series, man. I'm really excited.
Okay, so you'll be excited until JD Martinez hits how many home runs against the Tigers pitching? Really, right?
Oh, that's a good question. How
JD,
many?
we'll go deep for how many? How about an over-under? Let's start it out with that. Big Vito's over-under about JD Martinez. How many home runs? Over or under 1.5? How about that?
I'd say over 2. I think he hits 2 home runs in
Okay.
the series. Yeah,
I'm going to take the under. I'll take the one. He'll hit a home run.
Let's look at this for a few seconds. What did you make of the quick doubleheader that they had Monday? It was solid in that I really got a chance to see the Detroit Tigers pitching. It was something where you got a chance to kind of dig in a little bit, and you say, okay, the first game wasn't the best. They gave up a bunch of runs. Drew Verhagen got rocked, and that was a little bit disappointing. But then you come back with Fires, and so going into it, you might have assumed that they were going to lose both games when you say, you're throwing up there Verhagen and Fires versus the New York Yankees, the vaunted New York Yankees. But to come away after Monday with a split, I thought it was very well done, and it was nice to see them at least handle one prominent player that they have. Aaron Judge struck out a major league record for a doubleheader. That was fascinating to see. A guy that struggled so mightily not be able to get on base and to strike out that much was fascinating.
Well, and then I look at also, how about Giancarlo Stanton? Stanton hit a bomb against Fires. I was laughing when I saw it in the nightcap with the doubleheader on Monday. That was hilarious. I mean, it was this was like BP practice for him. He just connected and killed the baseball. So, I mean, that was pretty darn cool to see, too.
Quick correction on my part. Aaron Judge struck out 8 times.
Judge, you know what, though? He is prone to that strikeout. So to kind of talk about that a little bit, he's going to strike out a lot. He's still hitting for average this season, which is incredible because he really didn't even hit for a great average before last season, before being a major leaguer. So it's kind of surprising when he came to the majors how well he hit for average and how well he's hit thus far for average, too, because he is a very susceptible K guy. He's going to be your power and K guy throughout the remainder of his career. But when he connects, it's going to go a long distance. So he's a guy that will, I think, year to year on a perennial basis hit 40 home runs. So the Yankees have that in their back pocket. And then Gleyber Torres, Giancarlo Stanton, Gary Sanchez, all these guys that hit for power. And that's why they're a behemoth lineup and a scary team to face as you get into the postseason, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was fun to see. It was nice to see that Fires have a little passion. But did you like that little bit of a little rivalry between Stanton and Fires? Caused a little bit of a controversy in that Fires said that Stanton was childish in his reaction when Stanton, after he got hit, the next at bat, he crushed a home run.
He did.
And then he kind of flipped the bat and pointed to Stanton. But when you look at the game scenario, you got 3-1 count. You have a small lead. I don't think Fires was intentionally trying to hit Stanton, but he does remember several years back he was also hit by Mike Fires. So there's some history there. I don't think it's juvenile. I think it's that whenever you get hit by a baseball, every batter is just going to be really hypersensitive to that. And so really a batter doesn't have much recourse when he's standing there. Did you see, though, how much padding that Judge and the legs of a Stanton have?
No, they wear a lot, right?
The face guard covering the jaw, all the elbow pads to cover different body parts from getting injured. So I do think that Nick Castellanos is doing the same thing. I think Miguel Cabrera is also wearing the modified helmet. I do think that players need to protect themselves a little bit more because those baseballs are flying at them. You know, I like the fact that James McCann kind of walked Stanton up the line and kind of cooled things down because there was potential there for some explosiveness, right?
Well, maybe Stanton would have punched McCann and then just went after Mike Fires. Remember what happened last year with Miguel Cabrera and Austin Romine? They started fighting. Like, do you remember this? Miguel Cabrera got into a boxer stance towards the end of the season. Like, Miguel Cabrera looked like he was a boxer all of a sudden. He was ready to go, man. Ready to go the distance. 8, 9, 10 rounds, a whole entire distance in a boxing bout. That's what he looked like last year. It was just hilarious to me. And then I thought when I heard about this and I saw some of this live as well Monday night, I thought, well, this long-standing rivalry, it's been renewed. And I thought Stanton maybe was going to go after Fires and take him out, another punching bout. And I was kind of, scared for Fires. I mean, Stanton's a huge dude, isn't he?
Yeah.
And, I like the passion, though, from Fires. I like that fiery, no pun intended, passion for Mike Fires. I like that he showcased that, and they have that long-standing rivalry because of stuff that's happened in the past between the two of them when they have faced off with one another.
All right, real quickly, we have a guest coming up in about 5 minutes. I want to play this for you because a little bit, something happened where it warmed my heart. Now, Nick Castellanos and Shane Greene started their own podcast.
I heard
on
about
the Detroit
this.
Tigers website. Here's the first couple minutes. One thing did catch my attention in the way that they kind of cavalierly said it, but overall, I do think it is raising the profile of podcast when athletes are doing these things. Journalists for websites are adding podcasts. Obviously, I knew back in 2013, so I'm a visionary.
You were a genius.
I knew the importance of podcasts, but something that was said by Nick and Shane kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
So first, we got to give a big shout out to Brian Almonte for making this happen, and he was one of the guys working in the PR department. And he came up to Shane and I in spring training. I think we had an early day, an early workout day before the game started, and we just all sat down. We probably had our post game meal in front of our post workout meal, and was just talking about how we can connect more with the fans. And he had the idea of a podcast.
He did. He said we should do a podcast, and I thought to myself, I've never even heard a podcast, so I'm not 100% sure what that consists of,
I haven't heard anything of a podcast either. The only podcast I've heard bits and pieces of is a good friend of mine back home listens to the Joe Rogan podcast, and he has some pretty interesting people on there and talks about their life and their perspective on what's going on with them. But other than that, I have zero experience with radio, podcasts, anything other than baseball. I don't have a lot of experience in.
No, except for when the camera's in your face and they're asking you questions.
Right. So I guess we have
kind of.
But that's different because they have the material already prepared, and we're just rolling answering the questions usually about baseball. Very rarely do we ever get asked about questions other than baseball.
Yeah, about life.
So anyway, Brian sat down and asked if we'd be up for the challenge, and Shane and I basically said, yeah, let's give it a shot. What's the worst that could possibly happen?
Worst thing that could happen? You want me to answer that question?
I mean, sure, why not?
Worst thing that could happen is people think that we're idiots.
But let's be real. Most of the time, if we play bad, they think we're idiots anyway.
There you go.
So, like I said, we got zero experience in radio, so we're winging this thing,
So Vito, obviously playing that, 2 parts stuck with me. One, Shane Greene and Nick Castellanos really aren't into podcasts.
Oh,
they don't know.
Tell Shane Greene, how dry is Shane Greene? Do I even dislike him more now, maybe? Already got a stunk as a closer.
So one, they've never heard of the Detroit Sports Podcast. So I actually tweeted out to Shane Greene and said, here we are. We've been around since 2013. We're the Detroit Sports Podcast. And then the other thing that rubbed me more than obviously, these athletes are busy, they're training, and they did name one of the biggest podcasts in the world.
Yeah, Joe Rogan, who everybody knows about, yeah.
And so in the podcast world, there are big podcasts, but locally, I do want to think that we're in the mix of something that's entertaining, and we are in the we're one of the upper echelon podcasts. But the other part, and I cut it off just after he said it, Nick and Shane said that, hey, we're just winging it. And that really, when I heard it, the rest of the show is good. They have good banter. They're having a good time, and they'll do a good job with it. But what rubbed me the wrong way is when you do a podcast, and if you want it to be good, you don't want to just wing it. Have a couple beats at least prepared of what you want to talk about. And when these athletes and when new people get into podcasts, they think that, okay, I'm just going to turn on a microphone and start talking. It's not that easy. You got to do something. You got to have at least, you and I, before we record, we say, we're going to talk about X, Y, and Z so that we can develop banter. And so when you're an athlete and when you're somebody doing it for website hits or just for fun, or as like Nick and Shane said, they want to kind of interact more with the fans, obviously plan it out. Don't just wing it, because now if you're in the podcast game, you're a representation of podcast. And so, you and I are not sitting here in my basement with our shoes off, just bantering back and forth.
Our skibbies.
We're trying to up it a little bit. So if you start that way, that's fine. I get it. There's not much of a barrier to do podcasts these days, but class it up a little bit. Don't show up, without shoes on, all comfy in your place, or talk like Nick and say, oh, we're just winging it here. That's the part that rubbed me the wrong way. It's a good podcast, but I hope they take it seriously and don't do it once a month. I hope they do it semi-regularly, because that's what happens with these podcasts. A lot of people start it. They don't end up doing it regularly. They do a lot of things that are wrong. And so obviously I'm a podcast snob, but I don't like the word that he said. I don't like, in my review of it, I don't like they said we're just here winging it.
And I don't like when guys say they've never heard of podcasting. Like, you got to be kidding me. These are younger dudes, by the way, too, Shane Greene and Nick Castellanos. They know all about podcasting. So that was like a subtle dig at everybody that does a podcast. And they think that we just wing it and we don't know our stuff because we haven't played the game enough, or we're not around the game enough, something of that sort. And guess what? It's a bunch of BS that they're spewing. And it's a subtle dig almost at us, and it really got to you, I can tell. And do you think they really care about what we're saying right now, though, about our critiques? No, they could care less. They would take a dump on our podcast if they could. They wouldn't even care about it either. Seriously, and they really care about Doc and Vito? Who are Doc and Vito to them? That's what they're thinking. Now, should they care? Sure. We have garnered some respect. We deserve some more respect. But my point is, do you think the Tigers organization really cares about our podcast and what we're saying to the masses? Even though we have a nice following, we do. But come on a serious note,
all I would say is, if you're going to do a podcast, at least type in Detroit Sports Podcast. Don't you think?
And we
Detroit
should pop
podcast?
up. I would think we would come up right away. But are they going to really even do any research? They are winging it, but it gives a bad vibe for everybody else that does a podcast. Now people might think you and I, right? Oh, we're just winging it all the time. And we can wing it. We're able to, but guess what? We do prepare. We do. And that is key to any good podcast or program, radio show, whatever it may be.
All we're saying is just class it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Prepare, do a good job, and give podcasts good names. And I do love it that athletes are doing it. The Detroit Lions have started one. Back in 2013, there weren't that many. So now they've recognized the value of it. People are saying, oh, you can do this podcast thing. Oh, yeah. But I'll give myself credit.
Because of you.
Of course.
You made it happen. That's why everybody else is following suit now, Doc.
All right, let's get to our guest. I'm looking forward to talking to Max Bultman, writer for The Athletic. He does great work. He has been covering the draft and looking at the Detroit Tigers. He does great work at The Athletic. Like we said, you can subscribe by going to theathletic.com/DSP. Let's get Max on the line.
It's Max Bultman from The Athletic Detroit, now on Vito's VIP line. Max, how are you doing?
Doing really well, Vito. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, great to have you on. It's your debut on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. A long time coming. We got to know each other when you were writing for the Michigan Daily at U of M, covering Michigan football. I would be there. We were chummy, I think. We got to know each other, and you're a great dude, and glad to have you on once again. And lots of Tigers news and notes to discuss this week on Tigers Talk, including Casey Mize being selected number 1 overall by the Tigers in this year's amateur draft. Something you know a good amount of info about right now. And actually, before I get into that, though, the Rally Goose. I just got to get your opinion about this dang Rally Goose and what the heck you think about it. Because in my opinion, it's far too gimmicky. I know they have done well because of it, or, associated with it. 5 out of 7, they have won. And, so they're doing well. But what are your thoughts on this Rally Goose?
9 times out of 10, I'm often with you on some of the gimmicky stuff. The goose, I just think, is especially funny because of how uninspiring an animal it normally is, and how you wouldn't think of a goose in the same way that a lot of times you have the rally cat or the rally squirrel, all these ballpark animals that find their way somehow onto the field at these stadiums. But I just think the goose is kind of such a hilarious animal to adopt as a mascot that I'm kind of strangely come all the way around, and I'm kind of a believer in the Goose.
But Max, how about a rally tiger, an actual tiger? You put it out there, just make sure you tame it and have somebody that really knows what they're doing with the tiger. I mean, right? Something right there, possibly.
There you go.
Or a rally beer, but they can't do that because they'd be chugging beers all game long and they probably wouldn't be able to perform. So they can't do that either. Now, one thing they did display was the ability to draft, I think, the right player at number 1 in this year's amateur draft and taking Casey Mize out of Auburn. This right-hander has 4 great pitches, good command of his pitches. What do you have to say about the Tigers' selection of Casey Mize?
Yeah, certainly it was one that fans and I'm sure the front office analyzed heavily. Because it was that question. It's you got this really solid, strong, pretty unanimous guy as the best player in the class that most people agree. There's some people that are curious. Is he the highest ceiling guy? But certainly all the other guys who maybe you could argue have higher ceiling certainly carried their own amount of risk. Mize is polished. He's refined. Having seen him pitch only a couple times on television, I certainly couldn't give you the most detailed scouting report. But when you saw him pitch, he looked really good. And from my side, I've done some reporting on him. I did a feature story on him. And what really impresses me about him, and the reason that I think ultimately I do like the pick, is because of how mature the kid is. I mean, you heard it a little bit in the conference call last night when he was asked about, how quick do you want to go to MLB? And he was able to kind of take a step back, and he said he wants to get to the majors efficiently, not necessarily as fast as possible, but in the right kind of way. That was really the impression I got of him too, as I was reporting on him prior to the draft for our profile series. Was that he's patient, he's mature, and he's thoughtful. And I think those are kind of the traits that you maybe overlook a little bit as you're looking at these really high end athletes. Is who's going to be able to be patient enough and have the right kind of mindset that as they're developing, as they're going through the minors. They're going to get the most out of that time. Maybe not get as discouraged or not get over eager to get there. And that's what really impresses me the most about Casey Mize, who's obviously a good pitcher. I mean, there's no question about that, and pretty unanimously, like you said, considered the guy. But what makes it to me a good pick is the extra side, the makeup.
And then, Max, if it wasn't Mize, it sounds like it might have been, and actually would have been, Joey Bart, the standout catcher, went to the Giants number 2 overall. But the Tigers have these great catchers already in their farm system, including Jake Rogers. Grayson Griner has been up with the big league club this year a bit. James McCann, the starting catcher, still young himself. So I think they made the right decision picking Mize. And now they have an accumulation of great starting arms and bullpen arms for this Tigers club in the future, too. And I really like what they've done, revamping the farm system, with that being said as well, Max.
Right, and certainly with the number 1 pick, you're not going to worry too much about who else is in the system, because you assume if you're drafting a guy number 1, he's immediately your best prospect at that position or very close to it. But yeah, I mean, you look at kind of the ways that they've routed things out, and now you can kind of see coming together, because you can't ever count on all of your prospects panning out. It's just not the way that baseball works. It's not the way that prospects work. So you figure you load up on a position like pitcher, and you figure if enough of those guys hit, a good percentage of them hit, then you're in pretty good shape at some point when they come of age around the same time.
So we like the selection. I like what they've been doing, revamping the farm system, really building their arms up throughout the farm system, too. You have Bo Burrows, Alex Vieto, Matt Manning, Franklin Perez even, who is hurt right now, and all these guys, and now Casey Mize. So this team, they could have maybe expedited the process for the rebuild of this club. What are your thoughts on that, and how good when this team could be good next?
Yeah, that one I'm still trying to figure out myself. I mean, because I do think that Mize is a good pick, a good player. But like we talked about, pitcher is not the only place that you need somebody, and it's not, certainly you wouldn't draft at the number 1 overall pick thinking that that's going to be the sole answer to your rebuild. You know what I mean? So it's the kind of thing where, there was some talent in this draft, especially the hitters. You look at a Nick Madrigal or a Jared Kelenic, and to me, those are guys that I would have thought long and hard about, because they are really solid-looking hitters, especially Madrigal, having come through college as good as an accomplished hitter as he is. And those are the guys that I think people also will kind of look at as this goes and wonder, like, ooh, is that the kind of guy who could have accelerated a rebuild, especially when you talk about Madrigal's age. But that said, Mize should get to the big leagues relatively quick because of how advanced he is. And when you start to look at all the other things that still have to happen in the Tigers rebuild, there's still maybe phases to go. You're still going to see probably some trades at the deadline this year, and you probably have to be reassessing every off season. Where is this rebuild at? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question right now because you still have so much development to see from guys like your Daz Camerons, your Isaac Paredes, and yes, even still some of those arms you mentioned earlier, your Bo Burrows and your Matt Mannings, to really be able to honestly assess how far along in the process they are.
And there's no doubt they're lacking positional player talent. I mean, you have Kristen Stewart who's killing the baseball, hitting for power, but he really can't field. Daz Cameron, as you mentioned already. But there's not a ton of guys within the farm system right now that look like major league contributors in the very near future, and that concerns me as a Tigers fan. And then you had brought up regarding Casey Mize that he could be up very soon here. When do you see him getting brought up to the major league level? By the end of this season, perhaps? Or will it be 2019 at the very earliest?
Yeah, I just don't see it happening this year, just in the way that they've operated with their draft picks in recent years. I don't particularly see them trying to rush him to the majors in what really shouldn't be a season that they're going to need him anyway this year. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I think that they'll start him. Emily Walden, who's our prospect writer at The Athletic, seems to think that maybe they start him out maybe like a high A next year with a fairly easy move to Erie. She wrote about that in an article this morning or late last night. And I think I tend to agree with that. I think you start him off and you don't rush him anywhere, but you let him advance freely as he's able to prove at each level, yes, I can handle this. And you maybe give him a little more benefit of the doubt on that than you would another pitcher who hasn't already accomplished as much. And that's kind of how I see it happening is maybe September call-ups next year. Maybe it's out of spring training in 2020. But I would not rush a player that you've invested such a high draft pick in.
And it's Max Bultman from The Athletic Detroit on Vito's VIP line on this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And so we talked about the pitchers and Casey Mize. Now, speaking of the positional player talent and maybe some lackluster guys, I've got to harp upon Jacoby Jones and his struggles of late. You can look at what he's done since he was hitting 300 at one point early on this season, and he has really tailed off. And his production has fallen off the map big time. And I bring him in particular, because you wrote an article about him gaining confidence as his season has progressed and going into this season as well. What do you make of his struggles recently and really over the course of this season as a whole thus far?
Yeah, well, it sure looks like I jinxed him.
You might have now, Max. Yeah, sorry to say that, but you might have.
Well, no, that's part of the deal. No, where that article was coming from at the time was he was making at the time a lot more contact than he had a year prior. And I haven't looked at the numbers in the last week or so to know if that's like how that's changed. Because I've been so buried in draft stuff, but yeah, I think that that's certainly possible. Is something that was just an early season thing that maybe in mid-May was too early to tell. But what the thrust of that kind of was is he felt like he was more confident and recognizing pitches better. And if he's doing that, then certainly you could see how that would have accounted for that start where he was up there around 270, 280 kind of thing with some hard to hit balls. Now, like you said, that's fallen off a little bit, and it's hard to explain necessarily why. Maybe it's pitchers adjusting to him. Maybe he's in his own head a little bit. We'll have to keep kind of see how things play out for him. His defense certainly makes him a player that it's worth keeping in the lineup, but like you said, it hasn't been offensively what it was early on.
I mean, maybe right now, Max, I know he's kind of your guy, and maybe some other people's guys out there, but he's a fourth outfielder, I think. And we'll see if he does start hitting again, and hopefully he does. There's a little bit of pop, but man, he can play some stellar defense. I'll give him that much. And that's why I believe he is a fourth outfielder at the major league level, at least.
No, I can see that for sure. It's not a situation where I feel particularly strongly one way or the other, but you see these flashes with guys, and it's the potential that you look at. It's certainly not maybe the most likely outcome, but when you see a guy like Jacoby Jones who can hit the ball hard and play some defense, you wonder what they can develop into. Maybe not what they are right now, but what they can become. And that's where I think the whole quandary lies with Jacoby Jones is, sure, he's not producing right now, especially like he was early in the year. But if you're assessing the system from an organizational standpoint, the question with him is what can he be, and how much do you believe he can be that? And certainly I would say right now, you got to be a lot less confident that he can be, like you're saying, kind of a starting core piece than you would have been maybe a month ago.
I think absolutely less confident, no doubt about that. I mean, he's hitting 217 in 48 games. since hitting 300 early on this season when it looked like he started to get things right and really righted for himself at the plate. And now we'll see what happens with him as the season does progress. Now, what do we make of these Detroit Tigers as they stand right now at 29-32 in second place in the American League Central Division? Obviously, as you already know yourself, Max, and a lot of people do know out there, the Tigers really have overachieved up to this point in the campaign. But what do you make of them, and what do you think they can do the rest of the way this season, too?
Well, we talk about this all the time, some of the beat writers. If you go back and look at where they were this time last year, it was not that different. And they were still ended up with the worst record in baseball, picking number 1 overall. So as much as I hate to be the guy who's raining on fans' parades, because I know it's a long season and it's totally fair to want some things to be excited about, I'm still not buying this team as like a 500 ball club or anything like that. And I understand that they've showed a lot of fight and they've been competitive, and those things may continue to keep up and may continue to prove people like me wrong. Certainly possible, but I just don't see right now a reason to really buy that this is a 500 team. Now they're going into Boston for a series this week. They just took 1 or 2 from the Yankees in a doubleheader, but doubleheaders are always a little bit weird. You often see them split, it feels like. So we'll see how it plays out, but I'm still not totally sure that this team isn't overperforming early on.
So, Max, really quick before I let you go, let's play a big game of Big Vito's over-under. It's hugely popular nationwide, worldwide, I think. Not really. There's no sponsor for it, but we're trying to do that. And with that being said, over or under 72.5 wins from the Tigers this season?
72 would put them at 90 losses.
Yes.
So I will put them at under 72 wins for the year, just under. I put them at probably 70 and 92.
Okay, fair enough. And Max, with that great stuff from you, you made a great debut on Tigers Talk, and we'll talk to you again soon, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You as well.
And back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and that was Max Bultman of the Athletic Detroit, who joined me this week on Vito's VIP line, or via Vito's VIP line, and a great guest. Huh? I mean, he had a lot of knowledge. I mean, he can talk the draft, Casey Mize, how good he thinks he will be when he'll be up, and then he talked about the Tigers and their roster this season a little bit too, Doc.
I very much enjoyed it, and we look forward to having Max on again. Definitely check out the writers and the staff over there at The Athletic. I think you and I both read that site fairly regularly, and we get a lot of content, good content about the Detroit Tigers, as well as reading the 5 numbers that we got to know every single week from yourself. I want to talk to you about that, how that came to be, and how you kind of go into your selection process in the second half of the podcast, as well as continuing to talk about Jacoby Jones, as well as discussing some of the key performers and some of the other performers that have been struggling as well for the Tigers. Stay with us.
And Doc, as you know, one of our fine sponsors at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is the Detroit Sports Commission, which has been bringing hundreds and hundreds of marquee events to the Metro Detroit area. And I'm speaking of national and international amateur sporting events, and all the way since 2001. And you can follow this great entity and organization that is the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram by following the DSC at DET Sports, and follow the Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic on Twitter and on Instagram as well at DETPKC. And make sure to also check out the Detroit Sports Commission's very fine website at DetroitSports.org. So, Doc, I love Marty Dobeck and the Detroit Sports Commission and the Zenith Prep Kickoff Classic. One thing I do not like, individual that is Jacoby Jones right now. And his lackluster Major League production. I mean, he has tailed off significantly. I already gave out the stat while I was talking with Max. 217 since starting off with a 300 batting average early on in the season. In 48 games played since then, a 217 batting average. Guess what that is, Doc? Very bad.
Well, Vito, as you know, throughout the course of a long season, players are going to have ups and downs. But with Jacoby Jones, I know you're definitely peeking into him and wanting to see more consistency from him. And you're saying that you don't see him solidifying the opportunity to be continuing to play for the Tigers because of the fact that he has not been consistent. What's been your critique? I know you asked Max about it, but do you think if the struggles continue that there's a solid replacement that you'd rather have other than Jacoby Jones?
Christin Stewart. But the thing is with him now, so you don't want to rush anybody, including Christin Stewart, who's been mashing the baseball. Thing is, he's a DH, and you already have how many DHs on your roster? Victor Martinez, Miguel Cabrera has to play DH once in a while to conserve him for the rest of this season. So all of these DH-type sluggers, including John Hicks even, I mean, where are you going to put all these guys? So you need that DH slot opened up, and guess what? Kristen Stewart's young and still can't play in the field right now. So really, you want to see him develop further as a corner outfielder before you call him up. And that's the thing. I don't know who else you would call up right now that is Major League ready outside of Kristen Stewart, and Kristen Stewart truly is not Major League ready when it comes to his defense.
You see, Vito, it's fascinating to see how Jacoby Jones will respond to some adversity, and maybe he'll also take to the Rally Goose and continue to get better and be more consistent. Monday's game, I was impressed, though, with Sandy Baez when Drew Verhagen struggled. You know, a player that you and I both can probably assume is a 4A player, struggles with command at the big league level. He can obviously be successful in Toledo, which is why he was brought up for a spot start. But Sandy Baez was unbelievable. He made his major league debut. He replaced Verhagen with 1 on and 2 out in the 4th inning, and he was able to eat up some innings. Sandy Baez is another young prospect that is somebody that can be productive for the Detroit Tigers. When we look at what's going on with the squad currently, they're playing a great brand of baseball, and so a guy like Jacoby Jones, if he struggles, then other guys are picking him up, like Nick Castellanos. He has basically picked this team up and put them on their shoulders, and he's been the solid leader. You have Miguel Cabrera coming back, contributing, and even though many of the fans are against Victor Martinez, he's kind of smacking the baseball around just a little bit. I would say the two most significant players right now for the Detroit Tigers, I would say, are probably Jimenez, who has gone out there and kind of solidified that 8th inning role. Many people are pointing to him saying, okay, that's the future closer. He's starting to look like the guy that we're confident in, and Nick Castellanos. And the people that are struggling the most are maybe Jacoby Jones and maybe on the pitching side, Michael Fulmer. Those two guys, if Fulmer and Jacoby Jones don't continue to contribute, Max might be right, and they might be under the 72-win mark.
Well, it's good to see Sandy Baez, like you said, Dak. I'm glad you brought him up. He was just called up from Double-A Erie. So impressive performance by him, huh? Coming in, Verhagen got blown up, 7 runs allowed. Baez comes in, throws 4 1/3 innings, 4 Ks. And you like seeing the strikeouts, too.
It was nice. People are talking about it. Yeah, Kristen Stewart, you've asked about him. He's been well, but the Tigers have said, look, we don't want to bring him up to replace Jacoby Jones because we want somebody that can play every single day, and we want to continue to see Stewart's development at AAA. And so I think maybe you might see him at the September call-ups, maybe. But by then, I still think the Tigers are going to be competitive. I still think that the Tigers might have a chance, to do some things and maybe make some noise, not because of their talent, but because the division is not that solid. So it's been a fun week. We do hope that Fulmer and Jacoby Jones can turn it around this week. It's going to be important because you can't continue to be carried in the starting staff by fires.
No.
And it's weird, too. The first starter the Tigers have versus the Red Sox is an unknown as well, making his first start. And so you go, the likes of Carpenter, Drew Verhagen, these young cats that they're bringing up. It's going to be fascinating to see if I'll look his name up, but when he goes out there, I think he might have some trouble with the Red Sox.
Artie Lewicki is a guy going, but he's started before.
Oh, he has.
Just to correct you, but he is new to the majors in terms of how many starts he's made. He really hasn't made many. This guy is very fresh and raw, and the thing is, he's probably going to get blown up. Well, the Tigers, so listen to this, though. It's Tuesday night's starting pitching matchup. Artie Lewicki versus Stephen Wright. Now, the knuckleballer Stephen Wright. Now, did you know this? Do you remember last year the Tigers blew him up? So the Tigers can hit Stephen Wright, and this guy isn't always consistent. So I think they could win. What if they win with Artie Lewicki on the mound on the road in Beantown? That would be great. A great start to the series for the Tigers.
How many wins do you think for the Tigers in the series versus the Red Sox?
Well, you got the two great lefties back-to-back, man. You got Blaine Hardy.
No.
The second, look at this, the future ace of the Tigers rotation.
Okay.
No, but then you have Matt Boyd, who might actually be that, or a great number 2. So they could get, I'm looking at this, and I'm starting to think they could sweep, but they're on the road. 2 out of 3. I'm going to say 2 out of 3.
Tigers
take 2 out of 3? Going out on a limb and being positive for once here on Tigers Talk. How about yourself then, Doc?
All right, let's go for it. Let's say...
Can you do the sweep? Can you say it?
No.
I'm going to look at these matchups,
I'm
man.
just going with one. One win.
One win. That's it. Really? But you got Matt Boyd. And you got Stephen Wright, who they've hit before. That's 2 out of 3 right there, man.
No, I say Blaine Hardy and Lewicki lose, and then they rebound with a win. The getaway day is the hardest day, so Boyd will get the victory.
Okay, so there you go.
All right, Before we get out of here, definitely to recap, we had a great conversation with Max Bultman regarding the draft. We've looked at the Rally Goose. We've looked at the big issues of the week. But finally, I'm just curious, how did the regular appearance in the Free Press with your 5 big numbers that are most important for the week come to be them. And good stuff. I enjoy reading it. Very good research, very detailed. You can read it at the Freep every single week. You can follow Vito and the network to get the links and read Vito's great work. How did that come to be?
I begged them. I told them I was broke and homeless. I told them I was homeless. I need money. So they gave me the assignment. Also, I brought up to them, I pitched, yeah, that is bad. I think homeless is being bad. Or, yeah, you're not in a good state. But anyways, this article I think is good. Something good to talk about. And writing it weekly, I turned it in Sunday nights, a little bit later this past Sunday, maybe past deadline, but they still ran it. That was great to see. And I just try to come up with 5 noteworthy stats and maybe nobody else is utilizing. Now, the Rally Goose thing, everybody and their mothers jumped on that bandwagon and has talked about it, but they wanted me to run with that. They wanted the Rally Goose stats. So that was like one idea they brought up to me, and they pitched to me, and I utilized it in my article. So that was like the lead-off topic of the 5 big stats to check out for this week and the Tigers. And then you have a few other ones that were noteworthy to me, at least. I mean, like Blaine Hardy, speaking of him, I was making fun of him. You know, he's posted a 2.50 earned run average over his last 3 starts and has failed to allow more than 2 earned runs in each of his last 3 outings. And in 4 career starts, all 4 made this season, he owns a 2.82 ERA. So you can say, Doc, so far so good for the 31-year-old lefty as a big league starting pitcher.
And then to finish off, before we get out of here, I know if Vito was in the press box and a foul ball would have come to him, he would have caught it.
I saw you tweet this out. That was good.
Another media member who will go nameless for now.
Sure, we'll do that for him.
I know that if the window was open, you'd be paying attention, and you would have gloved it, and you would have taken it down. Good stuff, Vito. I enjoyed the baseball conversation. Fun times ahead. I'm enjoying watching baseball and doing this podcast with you every single week. Thanks to guest Max Bultman from The Athletic. Always good stuff.
Always fun stuff with you, Doc, even when I get angry at you. But none of that this week on Tigers Talk. Adios.